Hello there, everyone. It's a very cold, snowy Sunday here in Washington, D.C. This is International Master Oladapo Adu, and I want to show us one of the games I played recently at the 13th Chesapeake Open, Chess Open. Um, it was held at the Hilton Hotel in Rockville, Maryland. This was actually my first classical event for the year 2024. And I actually have a couple more lined up that I'm looking forward to playing. So I play one of my favorite openings, which is the Keynesian attack. So I'm going to share my thoughts about this game. So let's get into it. This is actually the beginning of the game. It actually went knight f3, d5. I start with knight f3 when I'm not sure what my opponent is going to play. If my opponent is going to play maybe c5 or e6 or c6, sometimes I might just play e4. But when I'm not sure of what I'm expecting, I'm just probably going to play knight f3. So knight f3, d5, g3, knight f6, bishop g2, c5. So pretty much when you're playing the KIA, you just want to have this setup: knight f3, g3, bishop g2, castles, d3, knight b d2, rook e1, and then e4. You always want to have that setup. It's kind of like a slow build up. It's not an opening where you just want to blow your opponent off the board. It's a very slow build up, and normally it entails a lot of maneuverings. So let's continue. So after c5, um, castles, e6. Now this is actually like the French variation against it. Whenever your opponent plays an early e6, it's kind of transposes to like a French defense from the black side. And on the other side, looking at the c pawn, you could say, well, French, Sicilian, yeah, it could be either of the two. So, but against this setup, it's the same idea with white d3, knight b d2, e4. So d3 was played, knight c6, knight b d2, bishop e7, e4. Yeah. Now, so with the pawn push e4, there's pressure on d5. e5 could be played at some point in time, forcing the knight away from the defense of the king's position. So let's keep going. So c5. This is actually a little premature. I've never really seen this move before. Not that it's a bad move, but I've just not seen it. Normally, I see moves like castles, rook e1, and then c5. And then d4. Not d4 immediately. But after d4, after the move d4, so black pretty much is giving up on the c4 square. What do I mean by that? With a pawn on d5, the knight can't go to c4. So now to reestablish the knight, or let's say to make sure the knight stays on c4, a4 was played. So that when the knight gets to c4, we don't have any b5 trying to force the knight away. So the question is, why is the knight trying to get to c4? Well, two reasons. Number one, the knight on the c4 has some potential in black's position. And then by playing the knight to c4, you actually allow the bishop to get in the game, the c1 bishop, either to g5 or d2, depending on how the pawn shapes out. So a4 was played, castles, knight c4 immediately, b6. Now b6 is a good move here, and I think the reason why b6 was played, normally black would want to play a6 and b5 to force this knight off the board. For example, if a6 is played here, I'm just going to play a5, and then there's a hole here, and black really is going to have some problems based on this position, because even if you get the knight to d7 to play pawn push, pawn takes, knight takes, the pawn on a6 is going to be an isolated pawn, so I can just play b3, bishop d2, queen e2, double the rooks on the a file. He's no longer a king's in an attack. Now you're just trying to punish black because of the isolated pawn on a6. So these are possible things that can happen. But my opponent definitely knew better. He played b6 first. The idea of the b6 is to slowly play a6, rook b8, and b5, because the knight on c4 can be very annoying. So after the move after the move b6, I played bishop d2. Now, I think this bishop d2 was actually a slow move. The computer suggested a number of moves for me. The engine, he said if I was a good possibility, and yeah, he actually said if I was a better possibility. And then of course h4 also works well in white's favor. But the reason I play bishop d2 is just to get all my pieces on the best squares, because I'm pretty much practicing what I preach. Because I always tell my students, hey, move your pieces on good squares and good things will happen. If you move them on bad squares, bad things are going to happen. So I play bishop to d2. He plays bishop b7. Of course, my opponent is doing the same thing, getting the bishop to a good square. The next thing is going to bring the queen up, connecting the rooks. Just placing, making sure every of the pieces are doing something. So after bishop d2, bishop to b7, and knight g5. What's the point of knight g5? When I made this move, I was actually happy about this move. And the reason why I made this move was to try to create play. You know, you're going to hear me say that a lot. Create play is like make something happen on any side of the board. The idea of knight g5 is to play f4, you know, and probably bring the knight back and then just find a way to just push my pawn to storm this king position. Remember, this is a king's in an attack, so you always have to have it in mind to try to attack the king. But there will be some situations where you just cannot attack the king, so don't make it a do or die affair. So if you have chances of attacking the king, fine. If you don't, then just pretty much play the position. So after the move knight g5, he plays h6, which actually, you know, creates a weakness. So knight goes to h3. Remember, the reason I moved the knight to g5 is to play f4. So I'm still leaving the opportunity of moving the pawn to f4. So my opponent plays a6. Now, this is the maneuver I talked about earlier. The idea behind a6 is just to force this knight away from the strong square. So, and in this position, I think I played a5, and which was not a necessary move. I could still have moved the pawn to e5. e5 was a very good possibility. Because of the e5 move, you know, I can always, you know, there's pressure on here, all the way here. There's pressure on this knight. This knight has to move. So I have possibilities, but the reason I played a5 was because I'm trying to just slow down whatever black has here, so it doesn't get anything out of it. So I played a5. He played b5. I played knight b6, rook b8. Now knight takes doesn't work because now my bishop is here. I'm just going to take, protect my knight, and then white is just winning. So after the move rook b8, f4, f4. Even though black says the engine says black is better here, but maybe. But my plan is just to try to come after this king's position. So after the move f4, knight d7 goes back. Interesting, because normally white, black waits for white to kick the knight before the knight moves, but now it's moving on its own, well, which is okay for me. So knight takes d7, queen takes d7, and now I played f5. Now the engine said g4 was a better move. Makes a lot of sense. What's the point of g4? g5 is coming. If it takes, I can take with the knight, I can take with the pawn, and then now the queen maneuver to the king side. And now we already know why this opening is called the King's Indian attack. You know, it's going to be a lot of problems for black, especially having traded the knight that was defending the king's position on d7 with the knight on b6. So g4 was a good move here, but instead I played the move f5. And of course, my threat is just to go play f6 and mess up the pawn structure. So after f5, I think he has to take. Rook takes f5. H6. Now, during this game, in this position, I thought a lot about bishop takes h6. I was trying to see if I can make something happen, but the best I could say was a draw. Perpetual attack. And, you know, and that's not the way to start the first game you're playing in a classical tournament, you know. So I said, no, I'm going to have to look for something more. So now f6 was played, meaning we have some light square weaknesses on the king's side. especially with the light square bishop on the other part of the board. So immediately I move the knight to f4, trying to eye the square, keep an eye on the light squares around the king's position. He plays knight e5, good move, bringing the bishop to life, moving the knight to e5 to try to fight for those squares we talked about. Of course, I play queen bishop h3 first, with the obvious attack of rook takes e5, bishop looking at the d7. Here I think he has to play queen e8, because during my analysis I think he has to play queen e8, but he played queen d6. Now after the move queen d6, I knew the bishop was coming to c8 to attack the rook, and the rook doesn't really have anywhere to go, and I was not about to try to move this rook back. Already I felt with his with the light squares weak on the king side, even without a rook, I think black is going to be in a lot of trouble. So of course queen h5 right away. Remember, it's a king's event attack, so I'm trying to get all my pieces towards the king's position. So bishop c8 came, and then I played knight g6. What's the point of knight g6? It's not just about trying to get the rook, but trying to exchange off the strong knights. Because if you look at this position pretty well, there are two active pieces that black has, and that will be the bishop on c8 and the knight on e5. The rook on f8 and the rook on b8 can't really do much, obvious reasons. Rook needs open file so prey. The queen can't do much either, because she really doesn't have any place to operate. So the bishop on c8, which I think is the most active piece for black, now is about to get capture my rook. I'm so happy to give up that rook, because of my light square bishop, possibilities of bishop takes h6. I don't think this king will stay in the game for too long. So bishop takes f5, bishop takes back, rook e8. Now during the game I thought about this. My first one was bishop takes h6 for a couple of reasons. Number one, anytime you're playing a game and there is a contact between pieces, contact, what do I mean by contact? This is a contact, all right? Bishop h6 is a contact, all right? The knight is a contact. These are contacts. Contact is pretty much when you have a piece, pawn, or square that is attacking each other. Well, a pawn attacking a pawn, a piece attacking a piece, a pawn attacking a piece, or vice versa, or a pawn or a piece attacking a square. Whenever there are contacts on the board, you always have to ask yourself, what are the possible things that I can do, that I can come out from this contact? Now, this is another contact, knight takes e5. Of course, this won't make sense because it's going to bring the bishop into life. Down an exchange, you don't want an opportunity for this bishop to get in the game. So actually, bishop h6 would have been the best move for me here, but I played rook f1. But what would have happened after bishop takes h6? Well, after bishop takes h6, pawn takes, queen takes, threatening, check. He's going to move there, check here, it's going to be mate. And now if he plays bishop f8, attacking the queen, I simply take the bishop, because taking back doesn't work because there's mate in one. Queen covers everywhere. I mean, game over. So for starters, I'm getting a piece back for my bishop, for my exchange, or something more. So in the game, I thought about it for once, few seconds, maybe a few minutes, and I didn't go all the way. So let me put it. I forgot to see that after the check, the king actually doesn't have the f7 square. You know, these are some of the things one has to work on. So instead, I moved the rook to f1. What's the point of rook to f1? Just bringing in more pieces. You know, here something has to come out of this position. Why? Because I'm already down an exchange, and I have most of my pieces on the king side, and also have my pawns looking. I have the pawn chain going towards the king side. Now, those are the principles of attack. If you're going to attack in any kind of position, number one, you must make sure you have a pawn chain pointing towards that part of the board. And number two, you must make sure you have more pieces on that side of the board than any other part of the board. So after rook f1, he plays plays c4. C4 is it has to create play. You know, like I said, the idea of c4 is to try to open up a file where he can get his rook in and try and harass my position, probably trying to stop me from from going to get his king, just trying to force me to defend. So here I could have still played bishop takes h6, but I played bishop to f4. What's the point of bishop to f4? So I'm indirectly protecting the pawn on d3, because if you take, I take back. You cannot take with the knight because your queen is hanging. So I played he played bishop to f8. I played g4 here. What's the point of g4? Like, everybody's got to participate. You know, now I have all my pieces waiting to break through into the position, and the rook is on the best square, the bishops are on the best squares. Now I have 2 pawns that I can use to weaken the setup to try to get my pieces into the game. Mind you, this rooks are still not participating. This rook has still not participating. The bishop not doing much either. Not doing much, because when I say not doing much, I mean on the offensive side. So the knight on e5 pretty much is the MVP for black's position right now. So after bishop to f8, I play g4. Captures on d3, captures back. He plays queen c6, trying to create some play as well. What do I mean by that? I probably bring the queen back here, put pressure here. If he can capture my b pawn, he can just roll down his b pawn and just win the game. So here I think I played g5. My opponent didn't expect this move. He's told during the analysis, it was expecting me to play h4 and g5. I said, well, g5 works immediately, because by playing g5, 2 things are going to happen. If you take with the f pawn, you're going to lose a piece. If you take with the h pawn, you are going to get mated, right? If you take with the h pawn, there is queen h8 is very strong. Yeah, queen h8 is very strong. Queen h8 is very strong. So for example, let me just show up. For example, after g5, if you take here, I still can take there. Yeah, I still can take here. So if he takes here, this is going to lead to checkmate. Check. Whatever it does, mate is coming here. Why? Because the rook is already waiting, and yeah. So he cannot capture the h pawn. So I played g5 in the game. He played knight takes f, g6. Now he's exchanged his most active piece. Queen takes g6. After queen takes g6, he captures my pawn on g5. Of course, I felt bishop takes on g5. I'm not really threatening anything. I don't have any threat. I still have an attack, but there are no threats. But you know, it's always good to move with threats. So I decided to move to c1. The idea is to occupy the 7th rank. So after this check, it's pretty much going to be mate, because this would have been covered. I don't know if this is the best move by my opponent or not during the game, but during the analysis I found out queen takes c1 was the only move. Queen takes c1, bishop takes c1, bishop d6. Finally, we don't have a knight on e5. Now the bishop has opportunity to get in the game, but I think it's a little bit too late, because knight just took on g5. You know, taking on g5, I take back on d6, and I can always take back here or go back there and make the life of this king very uncomfortable. So bishop takes g5 and bishop e5. At this point, bishop here threatens checkmate. Now you cannot play rook b7 because you're going to lose that, and that's going to be mate. And the only move you can play is rook e7, which also forces checkmate. How? Because we have queen check, king moves to f8, queen h8 check, black resigns. Why? Because if the king goes to f7, queen takes g7 will be checkmate. So, and that was how the game ended. Not your typical kind of KIDA position, but at least I still kind of made it work. You know, after sacrificing the exchange, my light square bishop dominated the board. My queen, my bishop, every piece was just doing something. Okay, so that's about it. And like I said, that was my first classical tournament of the year 2024. Looking forward to sharing more of my videos. If you like this video, make a comment, and see you all soon. Thank you. And like I said, it's really cold and snowy here. Um, I hope you all enjoying your weather wherever you are. See you soon. Bye.